focus here. Here's our After Effects layer, and it now fades in as the camera moves on. So let's preview this. Now, let's add some motion blur, but there is one slight problem. The particle generator doesn't generate real looking motion blur. So After Effects has sort of a solution. Now I'm going to create a new adjustment layer. And remember, an adjustment layer is a layer you add effects to that affect the layers beneath it. For example, if I were to choose Effect, Color Correction, Hue and Saturation, I could desaturate the entire composition with this one effect, or, add saturation or brighten it or whatever. But I don't want to do that. Instead, I'm going to go to my effects and preset, type in Force Motion Blur. Here it is. I'm going to drag it out onto my adjustment layer. And it's already set up with some good settings. Now, if we look at this during a fast moment, you'll see we are sort of rendering out motion blur. Now we can turn the shutter angle up, or the motion blur amount, and that'll kind of streak it even longer. But it starts breaking up a bit, and you may want to increase the samples. See, the blur samples. 16 is pretty good, but remember, the more samples, the longer it's going to take to render. But we'll caution to the wind on this one. So it kind of flies in now. The cool part is when it's going to kind of zoom past. See, that looks really good when we kind of fly past all of the layers, kind of have sort of a space warp effect. And you can also add more particles. Now, these particles are a little dead, and I'm going to shut the blur off of the adjustment layer while we work, because it does take some time to render. Now, we can add a little life to our particles. So with that particle layer selected, I can go into the physics, change the animation to maybe like a vortex, and turn the velocity up just a little bit. And that way, they just sort of move around a bit. Maybe even less than that, 0.02. And that way they just have a little bit of life while, you're kind of static. Trying to wrap this up, but I just want to keep showing you cool things. So one more cool thing. Just, don't stay up too late watching these. Now, here's our null object. And we've animated to this After Effects title. So now we have one more title and we're done, right? So I'm going to move forward because we want our title to be up for a moment. Set another keyframe for the position. And then I'm also going to set a keyframe for the orientation at this point in time. So that, let me shut off our motion blur again so that we're not taxed here. So it flies in. We go to the next title. It pauses for a moment. And then we want it to do something else. Now, we could fly past it again or do something else, but what if we change the orientation of the null object? Rotated the world, flew around the world like this, or any other number of ways. Now, our title is not the center of what the camera is looking at, as you can see the null object is. But what if we can move our title to be right where the null object is, so that our camera was flying around it specifically? Well, After Effects has a lot of tools for looking at things in 3D. And if we go here to the active camera and we go to the top view, it's going to look kind of like a bird's eye view down on our layers. There's our particles, and if you select layers, you can kind of see where they're at. Here's our logo right here. And here's our camera, and here's our After Effects text layer. So remember the second title. It's way up here. It's way up north. And if I go in here, I can see where my null object is too. Here's my null object. After Effects title, null object. So how can I sync those together? Well, what I can do is take the After Effects layer, which is right here, and move it in line with the null object. And to do that, I just go to the Z-axis here, roll over, and just push it until it lines up. You can also roll the mouse button to zoom in to really refine it, or use your up and down arrow keys to get it just right. So now I've lined it up, but now it's going to be further in space and probably a little bit smaller. So now if I go back to our active camera, now I can see that my After Effects text is a little bit smaller than before. So instead of even worrying about moving it, I'm just going to scale it up and then reposition it. So now we're basically where we left off. Everything should still animate the same, except now our camera pivot point, or in this case our null object, remember our wagon that's pulling the camera around and rotating it, our null object can now be rotated to fly around. So what I can do, well, I can do a lot of things. I can fly upward and have another title waiting for me up here, spin around, and even move around. So what I'll do is I'll hit U on the keyboard, and we'll go to the end of our animation. So it animates to our After Effects title. It holds for a moment. We set our keyframe for the position and the orientation, or the rotation. And then I'm going to just move forward a little bit. So what can we do? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to rotate on the Y-axis. And I hold down Shift and it'll snap to that rotation. And I'm going to select these two keyframes, hit F9, so that we have a nice smooth animation. And now we've sort of stopped here. And then I can shut this After Effects layer off so that we don't see it. And I can do that by selecting the layer and hitting Alt in bracket. Or just dragging it in and holding down Shift and it'll snap to the CTI, or the current time indicator. Okay, so now we need another title to be here. So let's duplicate the After Effects title. And now we'll take our After Effects title, take the rotation tool, and rotate it this way. So now it's facing the camera. We'll move it into position. So if we look at the animation, look what's happening. We go from one title to the next title. Now the trick is going to be animating this in a way that looks good. So first thing, we'll make our second After Effects layer longer and then the beginning of it shorter so that it overlaps less. And let's figure out what we can do. So right here is about when we should start seeing it. So I'm going to trim it to right there so that before you don't see it, and then once it starts coming around, that's when you start seeing it. Now we also want to fade out the first layer. So I'll hit T, set a keyframe for the opacity, move forward, fade it out. And now we have our new layer, and then we can double click on it and change it to now in 3D. It's always been, but oh well. So that it kind of comes into play here. Now, our layer isn't quite lined up, so let's go and line it up, and let's make sure that our animation looks okay. I mean, obviously, your imagination is what's limiting this effect. If you want to do anything, you can. It's just a matter of putting the layers into the proper position and, making sure the null object, rotates around a specific point in order to do that. But obviously, with this 3D engine, there's a lot of possibilities. Now, what is this tutorial on? Are we talking about titling, or are we talking about 3D? I don't remember. But I'm glad we got a lot of the 3D stuff in. I know a lot of people are curious about it, and I didn't mean to throw this all at you at the intermediate level, although I suspect there's some people out there watching this that know a few things about After Effects. But that's okay, because I try to mix it up and put some good tips in there for everybody. In fact, you guys want to know a really good tip right now? Let me think of one. I got nothing. Okay, let's check it out. All right, this tutorial took way longer than I wanted it to, but hey, I hope you guys found some useful tips. Let me go down to my list, make sure I covered everything. We're good to go. All right, remember to check out videocopilot.net for some more advanced tutorials. I don't know if they're more advanced than this one, but I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.